Pam Bondi walked into that Senate hearing expecting routine vetting. What she got instead was a public interrogation that cut straight to the bone. Senator Mazi Hirono wasn't there to exchange pleasantries, she was there to test whether Bondi would serve the Constitution or bow to political loyalty. And the very first question set the tone, blunt, personal, and impossible to dodge. Bondi denied ever facing harassment allegations, but that was only the warm-up. Hirono then turned to the issue that has haunted every nominee connected to national controversy, the 2020 election: who won? It should have been the easiest question in the world. But Bondi's careful hesitation spoke volumes. This wasn't just about facts, it was about allegiance.
2020 presidential election.
Joe Biden is the President of the United States.
Ms. Bondi, you know that there is a difference between acknowledging it and, I can say that Donald Trump won the 2024 election. I may not like it, but I can say it. You cannot say who won the 2020 presidential election. Okay. It's disturbing that you can't give voice to that fact. Moving on to DOJ's independence from politics. Ms. Bondi, if you are confirmed as Attorney General, you will take an oath to the Constitution and not to any individual, including the President. To start, I'd like to know during the election, during the campaign. First, are the felons convicted of breaking into the Capitol on January 6th hostages or patriots, quoting Trump, as President-elect Trump has said repeatedly? Do you agree with his characterization of the felons that I referred to?
I am not familiar with that statement, Senator.
I just familiarized you with that statement. Do you agree with that statement?
I'm not familiar with it, Senator.
No answer. He has also said illegal immigration is poisoning the blood of our nation. He said that in December 2023. Do you agree with that statement?
Senator, I am not familiar with that statement, but what I can tell you is I went to the border a few months ago. I went to Yuma, Arizona, and what I saw at that border was horrific, Senator. It was horrific.
Ms. Bondi,
I went to a rape crisis center.
That is
If I could
not my
finish.
question.
I went to a rape crisis center. Well, I'm not familiar with the statement, but I went to a rape crisis center. I met with Border Patrol agents. I'm sure you've been to the border as well. So
I want to get to my next question. So I believe that you responded to a question from Senator Whitehouse, and let me get your response again. You said that the White House, if I'm putting words in your mouth, correct me. You said that the White House will play no role in investigative or charging decisions in the DOJ. Is that correct?
Senator, what I said is that it is the Department of Justice's decision to determine what cases will be prosecuted.
What role will the White House have in investigative or prosecutorial decisions of the DOJ?
It is the Department of Justice's decision, Senator.
So that sounds to me that you're saying that the White House will not have any kind of role. Meanwhile, though, you have an incoming president who said, I have the absolute right to do what I want to do with the Justice Department. And in fact, President-elect Trump considers the DOJ to be his law firm. I ask you this. If President-elect Trump asks, suggests, or hints that you as Attorney General should investigate one of his proceedings, would you do so?
Me, had you met with gotten to
now,
know me, who refused or discussed is that it's the Attorney General to
I'm very
follow
happy to listen
the
to
law.
your responses under oath, Ms. Bondi. So I think it's really important to us that the Attorney General be independent of the White House. And you have a president-elect who considers the AG's office his law firm. I would like to know whether if the president suggests, hints, asks, that you as Attorney General should investigate one of his perceived enemies?
Senator, I certainly have not heard the president say that, But what I will tell you is 2/3 of Americans have lost faith in the Department of Justice. And it's statements like that, I believe,
Ms.
that make
Bondi.
people continue to lose faith. If I am confirmed as Attorney General, it will be my job
Getting
to
on
not
to my
only
next
keep
question,
America
you're not
safe,
responding.
but restore integrity to that department.
Why don't we
And that's
move
what
on
I
to
plan
something
on
that
doing
you said?
every single day as Attorney General.
On August 25th, 2025, on Fox News, you said, when Republicans prosecutors will be prosecuted, once the investigators will be investigated. Ms. Bondi, is Jack Smith one of those bad prosecutors that you will prosecute as AG?
Senator, you hesitated a bit when I said the bad ones. Every decision will
Sometimes
be
badness
made
in the eyes of the beholder. I'm just asking whether you would consider Jack Smith to
Senator,
be one of the people. How about Liz Cheney?
Senator.
How about Mary?
In that tense exchange, the stakes became crystal clear. Would the next Attorney General enforce the law without fear or favor, or would the Department of Justice become just another political weapon? The very first moments of questioning set the tone for everything that followed. Senator Hirono didn't waste time with policy debates or long speeches. Instead, she cut straight to the most personal and unflinching line of inquiry possible: fitness to serve. With the cameras rolling, she asked Pam Bondi if she had ever, since becoming an adult, made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any form of harassment or assault. It was a blunt yes or no test of character. Bondi, without hesitation, denied it. Hirono pressed further, asking whether Bondi had ever faced disciplinary action or entered into a settlement over such behavior. Again, Bondi's answer was a flat no. On paper, these exchanges seemed routine, almost procedural, but in the chamber the weight was undeniable. This wasn't just a checklist, it was a signal that nothing would be off limits. Hirono was putting Bondi on notice. The hearing would not be polite theater but a stress test of credibility, transparency, and judgment. Passing the first round didn't mean the danger was over. It meant the gloves were off, and the real battles were only just beginning. After clearing the opening round, Pam Bondi faced a far sharper blade. Senator Hirono shifted the spotlight from personal conduct to the very core of public trust, the acceptance of facts. She asked a question so straightforward that it should have required no thought at all. Who won the 2020 presidential election? The chamber fell quiet. For any nominee to the highest law enforcement office, this was more than a history quiz. It was a measure of whether truth itself would anchor their decisions. Bondi's response was careful, almost too careful. Instead of answering directly, she leaned into rehearsed phrases, sidestepping the clarity Hirono demanded. That hesitation spoke louder than words. Hirono pressed harder, reminding everyone that acknowledgement of fact is not the same as personal preference. The test here was not political, it was about integrity. Could Bondi say plainly and without hesitation what millions of Americans already knew, or would she hide behind ambiguity? In that moment it became clear this hearing wasn't about resumes or career highlights. It was about whether the nation's next top law officer could uphold reality in a world where even basic truths have become battlegrounds. Once the question of facts was on the table, Senator Hirono turned to something even more critical: independence. She reminded the chamber that the Department of Justice must serve the Constitution, not political agendas. Then she put Pam Bondi under direct pressure. Would she allow the White House to play any role in investigative or prosecutorial decisions? Bondi's answer sounded firm on the surface. She insisted such choices belonged to the Department of Justice. But the tone, polished and lawyerly, left room for interpretation. It wasn't the unshakable declaration Hirono was searching for. The senator pressed again, demanding clarity. Could the White House interfere even by suggestion or hint? The exchange revealed a fault line. Bondi repeated her stance but avoided bold language that would shut the door completely. To the casual observer, it might have seemed like just another back and forth. But for those watching closely, it raised the question of whether her independence was as solid as she claimed, or whether influence could still creep through the cracks. Hirono's persistence made one thing clear: the fight wasn't about political labels, but about whether the nation's top legal office could remain untouchable in the face of outside pressure. With the groundwork laid on independence, Senator Hirono raised the temperature again. This time the questions weren't about theory, they were about moments that had torn the country apart. She asked Pam Bondi directly whether those convicted for storming the Capitol should be considered hostages or patriots. It was a trapdoor of a question, designed to test not just legal reasoning but moral clarity. Bondi sidestepped, claiming she wasn't familiar with the statement being referenced. But Hirono wasn't about to let her off the hook. She moved immediately to another flashpoint, immigration rhetoric. She cited an incendiary remark that described illegal immigration as poisoning the blood of the nation. Did Bondi agree? Again the nominee slipped sideways, avoiding a direct answer. Instead she pivoted to her recent trip to the border, describing horrific conditions but refusing to touch the core of the question. To some this might have looked like discipline. To others it revealed a reluctance to confront dangerous language head-on. Hirono's line of questioning wasn't just about policies, it was about whether Bondi would face extremism directly or retreat into polished evasions. After circling through evasions, Senator Hirono changed tactics. Instead of quoting rhetoric, she grounded her questions in lived experience. She described her own visit to the southern border, not in terms of statistics or headlines, but through the raw reality of a rape crisis center she had personally seen. Survivors' families, and the frontline agents who confront these tragedies daily were at the heart of her words. Then she challenged Pam Bondi. Could she reconcile these human costs with her carefully worded answers? Bondi tried to respond by repeating that what she saw at the border was horrific, but her reply sounded rehearsed, more like a soundbite than an acknowledgement of the pain Hirono was laying bare. This wasn't just a clash of political views, it was a moral confrontation. Hirono demanded recognition of the suffering behind the talking points, pushing Bondi to step beyond platitudes and confront the human toll directly. In that moment the hearing shifted. The debate was no longer about abstract policy, but about empathy and credibility, and Bondi's inability to match Hirono's personal urgency left an impression that her answers, however polished, were missing the weight of lived truth. Just when it seemed the questioning couldn't get sharper, Senator Hirono pulled out one of the most explosive topics of the day. She referenced Bondi's past comments on national television, where she suggested that bad prosecutors would one day face prosecution themselves. The statement was already controversial, but Hirono pushed it further by naming names. Would Bondi, if confirmed, consider figures like Jack Smith, Liz Cheney, or Merrick Garland among those she deemed unfit? It was the kind of moment that demands either courage or caution. Bondi chose caution. She refused to prejudge anyone, repeating that no decisions had been made, and none would be made without evidence. On the surface it sounded responsible, yet to many listening, the ambiguity was striking. By refusing to draw a clear line, Bondi left open the possibility of using prosecutorial power as a weapon, exactly the concern Hirono was highlighting. The exchange underscored a deeper fear that the Department of Justice could be turned against its own public servants. Hirono's final words in that round weren't just questions, they were warnings about what could happen if independence gave way to retribution. By the time the questioning drew to a close, the stakes were unmistakable. This wasn't simply another confirmation hearing, and Pam Bondi wasn't just another nominee. What played out in that chamber was a stress test of integrity, a trial to determine whether the next Attorney General would serve the law or bend under political gravity. Senator Hirono's line of inquiry exposed more than evasions. It revealed the tension at the core of the Department of Justice, a demand for independence battling against the ever-present risk of influence. From personal fitness questions to the 2020 election, from border tragedies to promises of retribution, each exchange peeled back another layer of doubt. Bondi answered every question, but rarely with the sharp clarity that builds trust. That hesitation may prove to be her greatest vulnerability. For a role that demands bold honesty and unshakable courage, silence or ambiguity can be just as telling as words. The hearing left viewers with one lingering question: if the nation's top law officer cannot give straight answers under oath, how will they lead a department sworn to protect justice itself?